You loved them. You gave your time, your energy, your patience, and they hurt you. Not once, not by accident, repeatedly. And the pain didn't come only from what they did. It came from what you kept doing afterward, replaying the memories, waiting for an apology that never came, hoping they would suddenly become the person you needed them to be. Buddhism doesn't ask you to suppress pain. It asks you to see clearly why you are suffering. And the truth is uncomfortable. The wound may have come from them, but the suffering continues because you are still holding on. Self-love, in Buddhism, is not self-indulgence. It is the courage to release what hurts, even when attachment begs you to stay. 1. Attachment is the root of suffering. Buddhism is blunt about this because truth does not need decoration. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This line is often misunderstood, so let's slow it down. Pain is what happens when someone betrays you, abandons you, lies to you, or fails to love you the way you needed. Pain is the shock in your chest, the tightness in your throat, the moment you realize something important has been lost. Pain is human. You cannot meditate your way out of it. You cannot think your way around it. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. But suffering is what happens after the pain. Suffering begins when the mind refuses to accept reality as it is. It begins when you replay what happened, argue with it, and try to rewrite the past in your head. It begins when your thoughts keep saying, "This shouldn't have happened. They should have been different," or, "If I just understand it better, it won't hurt anymore." That is attachment. You were hurt. That is pain. But the suffering comes from attachment to how things were, how they should have been, or how you wish they would become. Attachment is not love. This is where most people get it wrong. Love is open, alive, and responsive to reality. Attachment is clinging, fearful, and resistant to reality. When you say you're attached to someone, look closely. Are you attached to who they actually are or who you needed them to be? Most of the time, it's the second one. You are not attached to the person. You are attached to the idea of them. The idea of safety they represented. The idea of consistency you felt around them. The idea that with them you wouldn't be alone, rejected, or unchosen. You're attached to the version of them that felt gentle at the beginning. The version that listened. The version that showed effort. The version that made promises. That version may have existed briefly, or maybe only in moments. But your mind froze it in time and kept feeding it. And now, even though reality has clearly shown you something different, your attachment keeps insisting, but that version was real. Here is the hard truth Buddhism points to. What hurts you is not what they are now. What hurts you is that you refuse to let go of what they are not. You keep returning to memories because the present feels empty without them. You keep imagining conversations because closure feels safer than uncertainty. You keep hoping because hope feels less painful than acceptance. But hope, when rooted in attachment, becomes a slow poison. Clinging to that illusion keeps the wound open. Every time you revisit it, you tear off the scab and ask why it hasn't healed yet. Letting go does not mean denying the love. It does not mean saying it meant nothing. It does not mean rewriting history to make yourself feel stronger. Letting go means recognizing that love and attachment are not the same thing. You can honor what was real without clinging to what no longer exists. You can appreciate the moments that were genuine without forcing them to define your future. Attachment says, "I need this to be different for me to be okay." Freedom says, "I accept what is, even if it hurts." Buddhism teaches that suffering continues not because the wound is deep, but because the grip is tight. Notice how the mind behaves when attachment is present. It searches for meaning obsessively. It asks questions with no answers. It waits for apologies, explanations, or transformations that may never come. This mental activity feels productive, but it is just resistance in disguise. The mind believes that if it understands everything, the pain will dissolve. But understanding does not release attachment. Acceptance does. Attachment keeps you living in a future that doesn't exist, or a past that cannot be changed. It robs the present moment of its chance to heal you. Buddhism does not tell you to stop caring. It tells you to stop clinging. Clinging turns love into suffering. Clinging turns memories into chains. Clinging turns loss into identity. When you say, "I can't let them go," what you're really saying is, "I'm afraid of who I'll be without this attachment." And that fear is understandable. Attachment often fills a void. It distracts you from loneliness, uncertainty, and the rawness of being with yourself. But Buddhism reminds you that no external attachment can save you from inner emptiness. It can only postpone it. Letting go is not an act of erasing. It is an act of seeing clearly. Seeing that the relationship ended for a reason. Seeing that holding on has not protected you. Seeing that attachment has cost you peace, sleep, clarity, and presence. When you release attachment, you don't lose love. You lose the illusion that love must hurt to be real. And that is where true self-love begins. Not in forcing yourself to forget, not in pretending you're healed, but in gently loosening the grip, one thought at a time, and allowing reality to be what it is. Pain will pass when it is ready. Suffering will end the moment you stop feeding it. 2. You cannot heal while revisiting the source of pain. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because the mind does not experience revisiting pain as self-harm. It experiences it as loyalty, depth, or love. Buddhism cuts through that illusion without apology. Healing cannot happen in the same environment that caused the wound. You don't argue with fire while your hand is burning. You pull away, not because you hate the fire, but because you understand reality. Yet emotionally, people do the opposite. They keep touching what burned them and wonder why the pain remains. Revisiting the source of pain does not always mean physical contact. Often, the damage is happening internally. You revisit them through memory, through imagined conversations, through checking their name, their presence, their absence, through replaying the last words, the turning point, the moment everything changed. You call this reflection, but Buddhism calls it clinging. Reflection brings clarity. Rumination brings suffering. The difference is subtle but crucial. Reflection observes and releases. Rumination revisits and feeds. Every time you mentally return to the person who hurt you, you activate the same emotional circuits again and again. The body does not distinguish between real danger and remembered danger. The nervous system reacts as if the wound is happening now. This is why time alone does not heal. Distance alone does not heal. Insight alone does not heal. What heals is interruption. Buddhism teaches mindful distance, not avoidance. This matters. Avoidance is fear-driven. Mindful distance is wisdom-driven. Avoidance says, "I can't face this." Mindful distance says, "I see clearly what harms me." If you keep exposing yourself to emotional triggers before the wound has closed, you are not being brave. You are being unkind to yourself. There is a belief many people carry that says, "If I stop thinking about them, I'm denying what mattered." That belief is false. You are not erasing the past by protecting the present. Another belief says, "If I don't revisit it, I'll never understand it." But understanding is not the same as peace. Some truths bring clarity, others bring exhaustion. Buddhism teaches discernment, knowing when to stop digging. You already know enough. You know how it felt. You know what was said. You know what was missing. You know the pattern. Reopening the wound does not bring new wisdom. It brings familiar pain. There is also a hidden attachment here, the attachment to suffering itself. This is uncomfortable to hear, but necessary. Suffering gives structure. It gives identity. It gives a reason to feel connected. When you revisit the source of pain, part of you is trying to stay close to what was lost. Pain becomes a substitute for presence. If you suffer, it feels like the connection is still alive. Buddhism gently but firmly dismantles this. Suffering does not keep love alive. It only keeps you stuck. Healing requires space. Not punishment. Not blame. Space. Space allows the nervous system to calm. Space allows emotions to move instead of looping. Space allows insight to settle instead of fight. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes stillness, silence, and restraint. Not because the world is bad, but because constant stimulation prevents healing. If you keep feeding the wound with attention, it will keep demanding more. Attention is nourishment. Where attention goes, energy flows. When you constantly give attention to what hurt you, you are unconsciously choosing to keep it alive inside you. This does not mean suppressing thoughts. Buddhism never asks you to suppress. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure creates eruption. Instead, it teaches redirection. When the memory arises, you notice it. You name it. And you do not follow it. You don't argue. You don't analyze. You don't dramatize. You let it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. At first, this feels unnatural. The mind will resist. It will insist that the thought is important, urgent, unfinished. That is attachment speaking. The practice is not to win against the mind, but to stop obeying it. Each time you do this, you weaken the habit. Each time you refuse to revisit the source, you reclaim a fragment of peace. Another hard truth. Some people never heal because they confuse pain with meaning. They believe that letting go makes the experience insignificant. But meaning does not require suffering to survive. You can honor what happened without bleeding from it. Distance is not disrespect. Silence is not betrayal. Letting go is not abandonment. It is maturity. Buddhism teaches that healing happens when you stop demanding answers from what has already shown you its limits. If someone hurt you, that is the answer. If the connection drained you, that is the truth. If peace disappears in their presence, that is clarity. You do not need one more conversation. You do not need one more explanation. You do not need one more memory. You need space. And space feels empty at first. That emptiness is not loss. It is room. Room for your nervous system to settle. Room for your identity to loosen from pain. Room for something new to emerge. You cannot heal while revisiting the source of pain because healing is a forward movement. Revisiting pulls you backward. The past does not need your attention anymore. Your present does. When you stop feeding the wound, it begins to close. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. And that quiet is the first sign that healing has begun. 3. Compassion does not require access. This is where many people quietly destroy themselves while believing they are being virtuous. They tell themselves they are being compassionate, understanding, forgiving, patient. But what they are actually doing is keeping the door open to pain because they confuse compassion with access. Buddhism never teaches this. True compassion is not self-sacrifice without wisdom. It is not endurance without clarity. It is not remaining available to someone who continues to harm you. Compassion, in Buddhism, begins with clear seeing. And clear seeing often reveals something uncomfortable. You can care about someone and still recognize that they are not safe for your heart. Many people stay attached because they feel morally superior for doing so. They believe that letting go makes them cold, bitter, or unloving. But that belief is rooted in ego, not compassion. Ego wants to be seen as good. Wisdom wants to be free from harm. You can understand someone's wounds without letting them bleed on you. You can acknowledge their suffering without making it your responsibility. You can forgive without reopening the door. Forgiveness is internal. Access is external. They are not the same. Buddhism draws a clear line here. Compassion without boundaries is not compassion. It is self-neglect dressed up as kindness. If someone repeatedly disrespected you, ignored your needs, manipulated your emotions, or took without giving, then continuing to give them access is not noble. It is unskillful. Skillful action is central to Buddhist teaching. Skillful action reduces suffering. Unskillful action increases it. Ask yourself honestly, does staying emotionally available to this person reduce suffering, or does it quietly deepen it? Most people already know the answer. They just don't want to accept it. Another illusion keeps people trapped here. The belief that if you cut access, you are punishing them. This is false. Boundaries are not punishment. They are information. They communicate truth without hostility. When you step back, you are not saying, "You are bad." You are saying, "This dynamic hurts me." That distinction matters. Buddhism does not encourage resentment. It encourages non-hatred. But non-hatred does not require proximity. You can release anger without maintaining contact. You can wish someone well without staying entangled. You can hold compassion in your heart without letting them occupy your life. Many people resist this because compassion gives them a sense of control. If they stay kind, patient, and available, they believe the situation might change. But compassion is not a strategy to fix others. It is a way of relating to reality without cruelty. If someone could not meet you with respect before, compassion will not magically transform them now. What it will do is drain you slowly while you wait. Buddhism teaches that clinging to others out of pity is still attachment. It is attachment to an identity, the one who understands, the one who stays, the one who endures. That identity feels meaningful, but it is built on suffering. True compassion includes yourself. This is where Western thinking often fails. It treats self-compassion as secondary, almost selfish. Buddhism does the opposite. It sees self-compassion as foundational. If you are constantly anxious, depleted, or emotionally unsafe around someone, continuing to allow access is a form of violence toward yourself. Quiet violence. Socially acceptable violence, but violence nonetheless. Compassion does not ask you to tolerate harm. It asks you to respond without hatred. You can step away calmly. You can disengage without explanation. You can reduce contact without drama. This is not cruelty. It is wisdom. Another hard truth. Some people rely on your compassion to avoid accountability. As long as you stay, they do not have to change. As long as you forgive instantly, they do not have to reflect. As long as you absorb the pain, they do not have to face it. Your compassion becomes their shelter from consequence. Buddhism does not support this imbalance. It recognizes that actions have effects. When you remove access, you allow reality to teach what you no longer can. Letting go with compassion means you stop trying to manage outcomes. You stop hoping your kindness will finally be enough. You stop negotiating your peace. You release them without bitterness. And you release yourself without guilt. Guilt is another attachment. It keeps you bound to the past under the illusion of morality. But morality without wisdom creates suffering. Ask yourself this honestly and without self-deception. If someone you loved deeply were in your position, would you advise them to stay? If the answer is no, then your compassion is being misdirected. Compassion that excludes yourself is incomplete. Buddhism teaches balance, the middle way. Neither indulgence nor denial, neither hatred nor self-erasure. Compassion with boundaries is not cold. It is calm, clear, grounded. It says, I see you as you are, and I choose peace. Letting go with compassion is one of the most difficult practices because it requires emotional maturity. It requires you to stop proving your goodness through suffering. You do not need to stay accessible to be loving. You do not need to stay connected to be kind. You do not need to stay wounded to be compassionate. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is step back, close the door gently, and allow both of you to walk your own paths. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in clarity. That is compassion without access. And it is one of the highest forms of self-love Buddhism teaches. 4. The mind creates stories that prolong pain. One of the most overlooked teachings in Buddhism is this: the mind is not a neutral observer. It is a storyteller. And when it is wounded, it does not tell stories to heal you. It tells stories to protect itself from uncertainty. These stories feel intelligent, logical, even necessary. But most of the time, they are the very reason suffering continues. Pain happens in the present moment. Suffering is manufactured over time. The mind does this by building narratives around what happened. If I had said something different, if I had left earlier, if they had healed their trauma, if I had been more patient, if I wait long enough, they'll understand. These thoughts feel meaningful because they are familiar. They give the illusion that the pain is still active, still relevant, still connected to something unresolved. But Buddhism teaches that unresolved does not mean unfinished. It often means unaccepted. The mind hates open endings. It hates ambiguity. It hates not knowing. So it creates stories to fill the gap. Stories give shape to loss. They give structure to pain. They make suffering feel purposeful. But purpose does not equal truth. Most of the stories you replay are not reflections. They are rehearsals of suffering. Notice what happens when the mind begins one of these loops. The body tightens, the breath shortens, the nervous system reacts. The past is no longer past. It becomes present again. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are events, not facts. They arise, they pass. But when you believe them, you turn them into prisons. The mind says, if I understand this fully, I will finally be free. But understanding without acceptance is just mental resistance. You can analyze something endlessly and still suffer from it. Why? Because suffering is not a lack of information. It is a refusal to stop feeding the story. The mind also creates identity through these narratives. You become the one who was wronged, the one who loved deeply, the one who was misunderstood, the one who endured. These identities feel validating. They explain your pain. They give you a role to inhabit. But Buddhism warns against clinging to identity, especially identities built from suffering. When pain becomes identity, healing feels like betrayal. Letting go feels like erasure. Peace feels undeserved. So the mind keeps talking. It narrates the past. It predicts the future. It negotiates with reality. And all of this happens while life passes quietly in the background. Buddhism does not ask you to silence the mind by force. That would only create more resistance. Instead, it teaches observation. When a thought arises, you notice it. You don't chase it. You don't correct it. You don't argue with it. You simply see it for what it is, a mental formation. This is powerful because most suffering comes not from the thought itself, but from identification with it. The moment you believe the story, you step inside it. The moment you observe it, you step outside it. This is where freedom begins. The mind will resist this at first. It will say the thought is important, urgent, unfinished. It will say letting it go is irresponsible or dishonest. That is attachment speaking. Attachment wants continuity. Awareness wants clarity. Another subtle trap. The belief that pain must be honored by remembering it constantly. You think that if you stop replaying the story, you are minimizing what happened. But Buddhism teaches that memory does not equal respect. You do not honor pain by reliving it. You honor it by learning from it and releasing it. The story served a purpose once. It helped you make sense of chaos. But its job is done. Continuing to carry it is not loyalty. It is habit. Buddhism often compares thoughts to passing clouds. Clouds are real, but they are not the sky. The problem is not that clouds appear. The problem is forgetting that the sky exists. When you sit quietly and watch your thoughts without following them, something surprising happens. The stories lose their grip, not because you defeated them, but because you stopped feeding them attention. Attention is fuel. The mind tells stories because they are rewarded with attention. When you stop rewarding them, they weaken. This does not happen overnight. The mind has been practicing this habit for years. It will return again and again. The practice is not to eliminate the thought, but to reduce your obedience to it. Each time you notice a story and choose not to follow it, you reclaim a piece of your life. Another truth Buddhism reveals: some questions do not have answers that bring peace. Why they changed. Why they couldn't love you fully. Why it ended the way it did. The mind believes answers will heal, but many answers only sharpen the pain. Buddhism teaches wisdom in knowing when to stop asking. Not every door needs to be opened. Not every mystery needs to be solved. Not every story needs an ending you approve of. Peace often comes when you stop interrogating the past and start inhabiting the present. The present moment does not ask you to explain. It asks you to breathe, to feel, to be. When you stop believing every story the mind tells, space appears. In that space, suffering loosens its grip. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that sees them. And the moment you see that clearly, the stories that once controlled you begin to fade. Not because you fought them, but because you finally stopped listening. 5. Self-love is non-attachment to what drained you. Most people misunderstand self-love because they approach it emotionally instead of truthfully. They think self-love is about feeling good, speaking kindly to themselves, or repeating affirmations until the pain dulls. Buddhism dismantles that illusion quickly. Self-love is not comfort. Self-love is clarity. In Buddhist teaching, self-love is expressed through non-attachment, not coldness, not avoidance, non-attachment to what repeatedly drains you. This is where honesty becomes unavoidable. If something consistently takes more from you than it gives back, if it leaves you anxious, depleted, second-guessing yourself, or questioning your worth, then staying attached to it is not love. It is self-abandonment. Non-attachment does not mean you never cared. It means you care enough about your own well-being to stop clinging. This is difficult because attachment often disguises itself as loyalty. You tell yourself you are strong for staying, patient for enduring, loving for tolerating. But Buddhism asks a sharper question. Is this reducing suffering or prolonging it? Self-love, in this framework, is the willingness to stop sacrificing your peace to preserve an attachment that has already shown you its cost. Many people resist this lesson because non-attachment feels like loss. But Buddhism teaches that what drains you is already costing you more than you realize. Attachment drains attention. It drains emotional energy. It drains presence. You are not just attached to the person, you are attached to the effort, the waiting, the hoping, the constant internal negotiation. That quiet exhaustion you feel is not accidental. It is the price of clinging. Non-attachment is not an act of rejection. It is an act of alignment. Alignment with reality instead of fantasy. Reality is not cruel. It is neutral. What hurts is resisting it. When you stay attached to what drains you, you are telling yourself a subtle lie, that suffering is necessary for love to be real. Buddhism rejects this completely. Love does not require self-erasure. Connection does not require constant pain. Care does not require collapse. If an attachment demands that you shrink, silence yourself, or tolerate harm, it is not asking for love. It is asking for permission. Non-attachment is the refusal to grant that permission. This does not mean you become hardened or closed. It means you become selective. You stop offering your inner world to what cannot hold it responsibly. Buddhism emphasizes wise effort. Effort that leads toward freedom, not deeper entanglement. Ask yourself honestly, has this attachment expanded me or diminished me? Has it brought clarity or confusion? Has it cultivated peace or constant inner noise? Self-love is answering these questions without self-deception. Another trap people fall into is believing that letting go means admitting failure. They think non-attachment invalidates the time, energy, or love they invested. But Buddhism does not see growth as linear or permanent. Some experiences exist to teach, not to last. Holding on after the lesson is learned is not devotion. It is resistance. Non-attachment says, I honor what this gave me, and I release what it now takes. This is maturity. There is also fear beneath attachment, fear of emptiness, fear of loneliness, fear of not being chosen again. Attachment often feels safer than the unknown. Even painful familiarity feels more controllable than open space. Buddhism addresses this directly. It teaches that clinging to avoid emptiness creates more suffering than emptiness itself. Emptiness is not absence. It is openness. When you detach from what drained you, there is a quiet period where nothing rushes in to replace it. This can feel unsettling, but this space is not a mistake. It is recovery. Self-love means allowing this space without panicking, without filling it immediately, without returning to what hurt you just to feel something familiar. This is discipline. Non-attachment requires strength because it goes against emotional impulse. The impulse says, hold on. Wisdom says, observe the cost. Each time you choose not to reattach, you reclaim energy. At first, you won't notice it clearly, but slowly the mind becomes quieter. The body relaxes. Your attention returns to the present. This is how you know non-attachment is working, not because you feel euphoric, but because the constant tension fades. Buddhism does not promise happiness. It promises relief from unnecessary suffering. Self-love is choosing relief. It is choosing not to reopen wounds just to feel connected. It is choosing not to chase validation from what already withdrew it. It is choosing not to argue with reality. This does not make you selfish. It makes you sane. Non-attachment also restores dignity. When you stop clinging, you stop begging internally. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop measuring yourself by someone else's capacity to love. Your value becomes intrinsic again, not conditional. This is one of the quiet miracles of letting go. You don't just lose the attachment, you recover yourself. Buddhism teaches that suffering ends not when the world changes, but when attachment dissolves. Self-love is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not performative. It is the calm decision to stop pouring life into what cannot nourish you. When you practice non-attachment, you are not turning away from love. You are turning toward peace. And peace in Buddhism is not emptiness. It is freedom from what was never meant to own you. 6. Letting go is a practice, not a decision. Most people believe letting go is a single moment, a realization, a breaking point, a night where you finally say, "That's it, I'm done," and wake up free the next morning. That belief sets people up to fail. Buddhism does not teach transformation as an event. It teaches transformation as practice, repetition, discipline applied gently, again and again. You don't let go once. You let go repeatedly. You let go when the memory appears, and you don't chase it. You let go when the urge to check resurfaces, and you pause instead. You let go when the familiar sadness knocks, and you don't invite it in. Letting go is not dramatic. It is quiet refusal. The mind resists this idea because it wants closure. It wants a finish line. It wants a clear signal that the pain is over, so it can relax. But healing does not obey the mind's timeline. Attachment has momentum. Habits have momentum. Emotional patterns have momentum. You cannot stop momentum with a thought. You stop it with consistent redirection. This is why people say, "I decided to let go, but it still hurts." They assume the decision failed. It didn't. The practice just hasn't been sustained. Buddhism compares the mind to a river. You don't stop a river by yelling at it. You change its direction slowly, patiently, by guiding it over time. Every time you engage with the attachment, you reinforce the current. Every time you don't, you weaken it. Letting go feels exhausting at first because you are breaking a habit that once provided emotional structure. Even suffering has rhythm. Even pain has familiarity. When you stop feeding it, the emptiness can feel unsettling. The mind interprets this discomfort as danger. It says, "Something is wrong, go back." But nothing is wrong. You are simply unlearning. Buddhism teaches patience because impatience is another form of attachment. Attachment to being healed quickly. Attachment to feeling better now. True release is gradual. You will let go in one moment and feel strong, then feel pulled back the next. This does not mean you are weak. It means you are human. The mistake is believing each pull means you have failed. Letting go is not linear. It is cyclical. Each cycle is an opportunity to practice again. Each repetition strengthens awareness. Each pause builds resilience. The goal is not to never think of them again. That expectation creates more resistance. The goal is to change your relationship to the thought. When the thought arises, you don't collapse into it. You don't build a story around it. You don't follow it down the familiar path. You acknowledge it and return to the present. This is effort. Real effort. Quiet effort. Buddhism values this kind of effort because it leads to liberation, not exhaustion. Another reason letting go feels difficult is because people expect relief to come before consistency. In reality, consistency comes first. Relief follows later. You practice even when it doesn't feel rewarding. You choose not to engage even when the pull is strong. You sit with discomfort without interpreting it as failure. This builds inner stability. Over time, something changes. The urge loses urgency. The thoughts lose intensity. The emotional spikes shorten. You don't notice the shift all at once. You notice it in absence. You realize a memory passed without dragging you down. You realize you went hours without thinking about them. You realize your body feels calmer for no obvious reason. That is letting go working. Another truth Buddhism reveals: letting go does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop reacting automatically. Feelings still arise. Sadness may still appear. Longing may still visit. But you are no longer controlled by them. Freedom is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of compulsion. Compulsion is what keeps suffering alive. Compulsion to revisit. Compulsion to analyze. Compulsion to reattach. Each time you resist compulsion without force, you strengthen awareness. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes gentleness. Force creates resistance. Resistance feeds attachment. You do not need to hate the attachment to release it. You only need to stop obeying it. Another subtle trap: waiting to let go until you feel ready. That moment rarely arrives. Readiness is often the result of practice, not the prerequisite. You practice first. Clarity follows. Letting go is also cumulative. Every small act matters. Not opening the memory. Not finishing the imagined conversation. Not reaching out. Not feeding the fantasy. These moments seem insignificant, but they accumulate. And accumulation changes identity. You stop being the one who is stuck. You become the one who is learning to release. Buddhism teaches that identity itself is fluid. When your actions change, your sense of self follows. Eventually, letting go feels less like effort and more like default. This does not mean the past disappears. It means it no longer owns you. Letting go as a practice teaches humility. It teaches you to stop demanding perfection from yourself. It teaches you to meet each moment fresh. Some days will be easier. Some days will feel heavy. Neither defines you. What defines you is the willingness to keep choosing awareness over attachment. Letting go is not something you achieve. It is something you practice until it becomes natural. And one day, quietly, without announcement, you will realize the grip is gone. Not because you forced it open, but because you stopped holding on. 7. Peace begins when you stop resisting what is. The final layer of suffering is not what happened. It is your resistance to the fact that it happened. This is the deepest and most uncomfortable truth Buddhism offers, because it removes the last place the ego hides. The ego survives by arguing with reality. It says, "This shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have treated me this way. Life shouldn't be like this." And yet, it is. Resistance does not change reality. It only adds pain to what already exists. Buddhism teaches that suffering intensifies when you mentally fight what has already occurred. You replay the past not because you don't understand it, but because you don't accept it. Acceptance feels like surrender, and surrender feels like defeat. But acceptance is not approval. Acceptance is clarity. When you resist what is, you keep yourself psychologically stuck at the moment of injury. Your body moves forward in time, but your mind remains frozen at the point of impact. This is why people say, "It's been months, years, and I still feel the same." Time did not fail them. Resistance did. You resist by wishing the ending were different. You resist by waiting for justice to feel satisfying. You resist by hoping for validation from the very source of pain. This resistance feels active, but it is passive suffering. It gives your power away to the past. Buddhism does not ask you to pretend the loss didn't matter. It asks you to stop demanding that reality apologize to you. Reality does not explain itself. It unfolds. When you stop resisting, you stop exhausting yourself mentally. The mind no longer has to argue, justify, or replay. Energy that was tied up in conflict becomes available again. This is where peace enters. Peace is not happiness. Peace is not closure. Peace is not emotional numbness. Peace is the absence of inner war. Inner war is what happens when part of you accepts the truth and another part refuses to let go of how things should have been. That division drains you. It splits your attention. It keeps you restless. Acceptance reunifies you. Acceptance says, "This happened. It hurt. And it is over." That last part is what resistance fights the hardest. Over does not mean forgotten. Over does not mean meaningless. Over means no longer controlling the present. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is always neutral until the mind loads it with past pain. When you stop resisting, the present moment becomes spacious again. You breathe more fully. Your body softens. Your thoughts slow. This is not magic. It is physiology. When resistance drops, the nervous system exits survival mode. Another misunderstanding is believing that acceptance makes you weak. In truth, acceptance is strength without aggression. Weakness avoids reality. Strength faces it without flinching. Acceptance does not say, "What they did was fine." It says, "What they did happened, and I will not let it define me." Resistance keeps you bound to the one who hurt you. Acceptance releases you from their psychological grip. As long as you resist, they remain present in your mind. As long as you argue with the past, it remains active. Peace begins the moment you stop arguing. This does not mean you will feel peaceful immediately. Peace emerges gradually as the mind learns there is nothing left to fight. At first, there may be sadness, then emptiness, then quiet. That quiet often scares people. They mistake it for loneliness. But loneliness is craving connection. Quiet is freedom from noise. Buddhism teaches that when craving and resistance dissolve, what remains is presence. Presence does not judge, it does not cling, it simply allows. Allowing is not passive, it is courageous. It takes courage to say, "This is what my life looks like now," without adding, "and it shouldn't." It takes courage to stop waiting for the past to fix itself. Many people delay peace because they think acceptance means giving up hope. But what they are actually giving up is false hope. False hope says, "If this changes, I'll be okay." True peace says, "I'm okay because I stopped demanding change." When you stop resisting what is, you also stop resisting yourself. You stop blaming yourself for staying too long, loving too deeply, or trusting too much. Those judgments are another form of resistance. Acceptance includes self-forgiveness. You did the best you could with what you knew then. That is not an excuse. It is reality. Buddhism teaches compassion for the self, not as indulgence, but as honesty. You cannot move forward while punishing yourself for the past. Peace grows when blame dissolves. Peace grows when comparison dissolves. Peace grows when the mind rests instead of searches. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes clear. Clear enough to respond instead of react. Clear enough to feel without drowning. Clear enough to let new experiences arrive without fear. When you stop resisting, the story loosens. The identity built around pain softens. You are no longer the one who was hurt. You are the one who learned. And learning does not need suffering to stay alive. Peace does not announce itself. It settles quietly when the struggle ends. You loved them. They hurt you. That truth no longer needs to be fought. The chapter does not close because you force it shut. It closes because you stop holding it open. And in that release, without effort, peace begins. 8. You are not losing them. You are returning to yourself. This is the final illusion attachment creates, and it is the most powerful one. It tells you that letting go means losing something essential, that releasing them means becoming smaller, emptier, less alive, that without this attachment, something irreplaceable disappears from your life. Buddhism directly challenges this belief. You are not losing them. You are recovering yourself. Attachment convinces you that your identity became intertwined with another person, that your sense of meaning, direction, or emotional depth depended on their presence. When they leave or hurt you, it feels like part of you left with them. But Buddhism teaches that nothing real can be taken from you. What feels lost was never owned by them. Your capacity to love, your sensitivity, your depth, your devotion. These qualities did not originate in the relationship, they originated in you. Attachment made you forget this. When you cling to someone, you slowly outsource parts of yourself. Your peace depends on their behavior. Your self-worth reacts to their attention. Your mood bends around their presence or absence. This is not love. This is dislocation. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when you abandon your own center and orbit someone else. Letting go feels like loss because you are returning from that orbit. Re-entry is uncomfortable. There is friction, heat, disorientation. But what you are returning to is yourself. This is why the emptiness after letting go feels strange. It is not the absence of love. It is the absence of distraction. For the first time in a long time, your energy is no longer flowing outward towards someone who cannot hold it. It is coming back inward. At first, this inwardness feels lonely. Not because you are alone, but because you are unfamiliar with being fully present with yourself again. Buddhism teaches that the self is not something to be constructed through attachment. It is something to be remembered through awareness. When attachment dissolves, awareness returns. You begin to notice things again. Your breath, your body, your rhythms, your intuition. You realize how much of yourself you had muted to keep the attachment alive. The moments you stayed silent, the boundaries you softened, the truths you delayed. Letting go brings these back into focus. That can feel painful because it exposes how much you gave up trying to preserve something that was already slipping away. But this pain is different. It is honest pain, clean pain. Buddhism distinguishes between clean pain and dirty pain. Clean pain is the pain of truth. Dirty pain is the pain of resistance. Returning to yourself may hurt, but it does not corrode you. It strengthens you. Another illusion attachment creates is that intensity equals meaning. That because something hurt deeply, it must have been essential to your destiny. Buddhism rejects this romanticization of suffering. Intensity does not mean alignment. Pain does not mean purpose. Attachment does not mean truth. Some experiences enter your life not to complete you, but to show you where you abandoned yourself. Letting go is how you take responsibility for that abandonment without blaming yourself. When you stop clinging, you stop outsourcing your identity. You stop measuring your value through someone else's capacity to love. This is liberation. Liberation does not mean isolation. It means connection without dependency. Buddhism teaches that true connection arises from wholeness, not hunger, from presence, not need. As you return to yourself, something subtle happens. You stop scanning the world for replacement attachments. You stop rushing to fill the space. You become less reactive. You don't need someone to make you feel real anymore. This is not numbness. It is groundedness. You begin to trust your own company, your own silence, your own rhythm. And from this place, future connections change. You no longer cling, you choose. Choice replaces desperation. Discernment replaces hope. Clarity replaces longing. This is why Buddhism emphasizes self-awareness over self-improvement. You were never broken. You were distracted by attachment. Returning to yourself is not becoming someone new. It is shedding what was never truly you. You loved them. You lost yourself in the process. Now you are coming back. Not in anger, not in regret, but in understanding. You are not empty without them. You are available. Available to live without negotiating your worth. Available to feel without fear. Available to love without losing yourself again. This is the final freedom letting go offers. Not the absence of connection, but the end of self-abandonment. And when you finally stand fully in yourself again, you realize something quietly powerful. You were never meant to be held together by attachment. You were meant to be whole on your own. 9. You do not need closure to be free. One of the most persistent traps after being hurt is the belief that freedom requires closure. The mind convinces you that if you just understood why it happened, if you just heard the right explanation, apology, or acknowledgement, then the pain would finally dissolve. Buddhism challenges this assumption directly and without sentimentality. Closure is not something another person gives you. It is something the mind uses to delay acceptance. The idea of closure is appealing because it promises relief without responsibility. It suggests that peace will arrive once someone else does or says the right thing. But this keeps your well-being dependent on forces outside your control. And Buddhism teaches that dependence is the opposite of freedom. Many people wait years for conversations that never happen. They rehearse what they would say, imagine what the other person might finally admit, and believe that this imaginary resolution is the missing key to their healing. In reality, this waiting keeps the wound active. It keeps you emotionally tethered to someone who is no longer present or no longer capable of meeting you. Buddhism teaches that craving resolution from the past is still attachment. It is attachment to explanation, attachment to validation, attachment to being understood. These desires feel reasonable, but they quietly prolong suffering. You do not suffer because you lack answers. You suffer because you resist the fact that some answers will never arrive in a form that satisfies you. Even if you received an apology, it might feel incomplete. Even if you received an explanation, it might raise new questions. Even if you received acknowledgement, it might come too late to heal what was damaged. The mind then moves the finish line again, telling you that you need just one more conversation, one more clarification, one more emotional exchange. This is how attachment disguises itself as resolution seeking. Buddhism teaches that peace does not come from tying up every loose end. It comes from releasing the need to tie them up at all. Life is not obligated to make sense in ways that feel emotionally fair. Reality is not a courtroom where every hurt receives a satisfying verdict. Freedom begins when you stop demanding that the past explain itself. This does not mean what happened was insignificant. It means you stop making your present hostage to an outcome that depends on someone else's awareness, remorse, or capacity to reflect. You reclaim your agency by deciding that your peace does not require their participation. Another hard truth Buddhism reveals is that closure often becomes a substitute for letting go. People say they want closure, but what they actually want is continued connection in a socially acceptable form. They want one last bridge, one final emotional exchange that keeps the bond alive a little longer. But healing does not happen at the edge of the past. It happens in the present. Buddhism emphasizes self-liberation, not negotiated release. You free yourself by seeing clearly that no external explanation can undo what has already been felt. What heals you is not understanding the past more deeply, but allowing it to rest. Rest is an underrated concept. The mind is tired from carrying unfinished stories. The heart is tired from waiting. The body is tired from staying alert for resolution that may never come. Letting go of the need for closure allows all of this tension to soften. This does not happen through force. It happens through acceptance of uncertainty. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because it offers no narrative to cling to. But Buddhism teaches that uncertainty is closer to truth than the false certainty created by imagined closure. When you stop insisting on answers, you begin to live again instead of waiting. Another illusion tied to closure is the belief that moving on without it means you did not care enough. This is false. It means you cared enough to stop hurting yourself. You do not need someone to confirm your pain for it to be real. You do not need their regret to justify your leaving. You do not need their understanding to validate your experience. Your experience already happened. That is enough. Buddhism teaches that clinging to the need for closure keeps the mind externally oriented. It keeps attention pointed backward instead of grounded in the present moment where life is actually unfolding. When attention returns to the present, the grip of the past weakens naturally. You begin to notice that your days are no longer structured around waiting. Your thoughts no longer revolve around imagined outcomes. Your emotional energy slowly detaches from unfinished business. This is not forgetting, it is release. Release does not require permission. The past does not need to be resolved to be over. It only needs to be accepted as complete. Complete does not mean satisfying. It means no longer active. Buddhism teaches that when you stop seeking closure, you stop feeding the last form of attachment. You step out of negotiation with what has already shown you its limits. Freedom comes when you say, without bitterness and without hope, that this chapter does not need another sentence. You do not need closure to be free. You need courage to stop waiting. And when you stop waiting, something unexpected happens. Life quietly resumes, not dramatically, not triumphantly, but steadily. You begin to live forward again, carrying wisdom instead of wounds. That is not loss. That is liberation. 10. Your pain is a teacher, not a life sentence. The final mistake people make is believing that pain defines them. They assume that because something hurt deeply, it must now shape their identity, their future, and their capacity to love. Buddhism rejects this conclusion entirely. Pain is an experience, not a verdict. What happened to you does not exist to imprison you. It exists to instruct you. The difference between wisdom and prolonged suffering is whether you listen to the lesson or cling to the wound. Most people cling. They replay pain until it hardens into personality. They begin to introduce themselves to life through what hurt them. They filter every new experience through old fear. They protect themselves so thoroughly that nothing new can reach them. This is not healing. This is survival mistaken for growth. Buddhism teaches that pain has a function. It reveals attachment. It exposes illusion. It shows you where expectations replaced reality and where boundaries were absent. Once it has done that, its role is complete. When pain lingers, it is not because the lesson is profound. It is because the mind refuses to stop identifying with it. Identification turns pain into a story about who you are. I am the one who was betrayed. I am the one who always gives too much. I am the one who gets left. These identities feel true because they are familiar, but familiarity is not truth. Buddhism warns against turning experience into identity. Identity solidifies what was meant to pass. It freezes motion. It turns learning into limitation. Pain teaches through contrast. It shows you what alignment is by revealing what misalignment feels like. It shows you the cost of ignoring intuition. It shows you the consequences of clinging, overgiving, or hoping someone else will become who they are not. Once seen clearly, pain no longer needs to repeat itself. If it keeps returning, it is asking for attention, not loyalty. Many people believe that moving beyond pain means disrespecting it, but Buddhism teaches reverence through release. You respect pain by allowing it to complete its purpose, not by turning it into a shrine. Another illusion keeps people bound here, the belief that growth must be dramatic. They expect healing to look like triumph, confidence, or constant positivity. Buddhism teaches otherwise. Real growth is often quiet. It looks like neutrality. It looks like less reaction. It looks like not being pulled into old patterns anymore. Growth is when the same situation arises and you respond differently, not because you forced yourself, but because you no longer identify with the old pain. This is how you know pain has taught you what it came to teach. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop proving your worth. You stop staying where peace cannot live. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Buddhism teaches that suffering ends when ignorance ends. Ignorance does not mean lack of intelligence. It means misunderstanding reality. Pain corrects misunderstanding by making misalignment uncomfortable. Once corrected, pain becomes unnecessary. Holding on to pain after this point is like rereading the same warning sign long after you've changed direction. It does not make you safer, it makes you stuck. Your past pain does not entitle you to future suffering, it entitles you to wisdom. Wisdom is not cynicism. It does not close the heart, it sharpens discernment. It allows love without blindness and openness without self-erasure. Another hard truth. Some people unconsciously protect their pain because it gives them certainty. They know who they are when they are hurt. Healing threatens that certainty. It asks them to step into the unknown without the armor of past wounds. But Buddhism teaches that the unknown is not dangerous. It is simply unconditioned. When you stop identifying with pain, space opens. In that space, new responses become possible. You are no longer reacting from memory. You are responding from presence. This is freedom. Freedom does not mean nothing will ever hurt again. Buddhism never promises that. It promises that pain will no longer control you. It will pass through without becoming who you are. You become someone who feels fully without clinging, someone who loves without losing themselves, someone who experiences life without turning every wound into a lifelong burden. Pain may have shaped a chapter, but it does not get to write the ending. The ending is written by awareness. When you see pain as a teacher, you stop asking why it happened and start asking what it showed you. That shift changes everything. It transforms suffering into understanding and loss into direction. You are not meant to carry pain forward as proof of depth. You are meant to carry clarity forward as evidence of growth. The deepest teaching Buddhism offers is this: nothing that arises is meant to stay forever. Not joy, not pain, not attachment, not identity. Everything passes. When you allow pain to pass after it has taught you, you are not abandoning your past, you are completing it. And completion is not forgetting. It is freedom without resistance. Your pain came to wake you up, not to define you. Once you understand that, you stop dragging it into the future. You thank it silently, and you continue walking. Not as someone broken, but as someone who finally sees clearly. You loved them. They hurt you. And for a long time, you believed the pain meant something still needed to be fixed. But nothing is broken anymore. What happened has already done its work. It showed you where you clung, where you gave beyond your limits, and where you mistook attachment for love. Those lessons did not come to punish you. They came to wake you up. Buddhism does not promise that life will protect you from pain. It teaches you how to stop turning pain into a permanent home. You are not asked to forget. You are not asked to harden your heart. You are not asked to become someone else. You are asked to see clearly. See that holding on has cost you peace. See that resistance has prolonged the suffering. See that letting go is not loss, but release. When you stop fighting what has already passed, your energy returns. When you stop waiting for closure, your life resumes. When you stop identifying with pain, space opens for something quieter and stronger to take its place. Peace does not arrive as a reward. It arrives as a consequence of truth. You loved them. That was real. They hurt you. That mattered. And now it is time to loosen your grip. Not in anger, not in denial, but in understanding. Let what hurts fall away. Not because it wasn't important, but because you are. And in that release, without effort and without resistance, you return to yourself. That is self-love.